Welcome back to Pre-Consent, the history show where we examine life in the pre-contractual era. In our final episode, we're asking the question, if states dominated human civilization for thousands of years, how did they finally disappear? Governments did not disappear because human beings suddenly became harmless, or perfectly logical, or morally pure. They disappeared because the state's legitimacy collapsed at the same time practical alternatives became more trusted and harder to suppress. The old states had always depended on people believing that territorial monopoly was necessary for civilization, which allowed them to ride out various crises of legitimacy. Once enough people stopped believing the state was necessary, these episodes of distrust became terminal. It's important to remember that by the late statist era, enormous amounts of human energy were spent on politics. Politics was the ritual of arguing over who should control the institution that controlled everyone else. People argued about parties, leaders, elections, policies, borders, public programs, emergencies, and reforms. Many people believed that this was simply what civilization was. They could imagine better rulers and better policies, but many struggled to imagine a society where law, protection, money, education, infrastructure, and social cooperation were no longer organized around a territorial monopoly. The old states promised order, but often produced disorder. They promised prosperity while creating debt, inflation, dependency, and distorted price signals. They promised peace while escalating conflicts. They promised rights while regulating peaceful life. They promised representation while ordinary people had little meaningful control over the institutions ruling over them. Over time, the gap between official mythology and lived reality became harder to ignore. This was made worse by the behaviors of the rulers themselves. The struggle between productive people and political predators may have remained a permanent stalemate had the rulers not repeatedly exposed their own nature. Scandals, wars, censorship, financial crises, emergency powers, corruption, propaganda, and public lies all weakened the aura of legitimacy. People increasingly stopped seeing the state as a guardian of society and started seeing it as an institution serving itself, which of course it always was. People often credit technology for ending statism, but technology did not end governments by itself, although it changed the battlefield. As technology advanced, abuses became easier to detect, harder to hide, and more expensive to justify. Encryption helped people communicate and transact outside state-controlled channels. Cryptocurrencies and competing monies gave people tools to escape monetary control. Distributed records made censorship and falsification more difficult. Online reputation systems helped people evaluate trust, risk, fraud, and reliability at scale. AI and legal automation also helped extra-governmental dispute resolution become cheaper, faster, and more accessible. This was the rise of counter-economics, as parallel markets, cross-border contracting, and decentralized communities rose in popularity. At first, these systems were treated as strange and radical, or even dangerous. But over time, more people noticed that they often worked better than the official institutions they were supposed to depend on. The transition did not happen all at once. Governments did not simply vanish on a single day. Some services were replaced first. Some jurisdictions became hollowed out. Some states lost control over money before they lost control over law. Some lost control over education before they lost control over security. Ironically, during the statist era, many pro-government people who equated redistribution with progress described that progress as happening in fits and starts, which is actually how governments also degraded, in fits and starts. Eventually, the state became less like the center of society and more like an obsolete legacy institution. Younger viewers are often surprised that there were people defending these dying states, but of course there were, because as we already covered, benefits were concentrated while costs were dispersed. There were always people who wanted the old powers back. Some wanted subsidies to return or to get control back. Ex-bureaucrats and ex-politicians especially missed the status that came from politics. Others were simply afraid of living without a ruler. But by then, contractual society had already learned the lessons of the statist era. Do not allow protection to become jurisdiction. Do not allow dependency to become legitimacy. And do not allow any institution to claim territorial monopoly over law, money, or defense. Thus, the loyalists struggled to make any real headway. Clients do not want war. Insurers do not want liability. Businesses do not want disrupted trade. Arbitrators do not want violence replacing judgment. Creditors do not want assets destroyed. Competitors do not want aggression normalized. Ordinary people do not want to pay for conquest. This is why attempts to rebuild states have always failed before becoming serious threats. Too many people have too many incentives to stop political violence before it becomes political authority again. The final shift was moral. People stopped asking who should rule and started asking, why should anyone have territorial monopoly? Once that question became normal, the statist era came to a close. The old debate about which rulers should command society was seen as backwards, and that marked the beginning of the modern era. That is how governments ended. They did not disappear because humans became harmless. They disappeared because people stopped treating coercion as civilization and started treating consent as the default. The pre-contractual era ended when people finally understood that law did not require monopoly, protection did not require rulers, and society never required a state. Thanks for watching.